Every area of Port is very different.
Yeah.
You go to one side, you're Muskoka, and then you come to one side, you're like you're on the beach.
Yeah.
Right. Then you go to another side, and you're like in a subdivision that's kind of right out of any city out of London. There's other ways to get to a price if you have a budget or something, right?
Yeah.
Price is $1 million, but you can afford $9 million. Well, maybe they have another lot sitting there that they could build that home with a couple different finishes,
For sure.
which is what we're essentially doing. Inflation is your friend when you own assets. And over time, if you want to build something sustainable without the ups and downs, rentals are a good base. So that was kind of my thought to start it.
I met Mike in an interesting way. I was renting a townhouse from them because we were building. And every morning I would wake up and I would go to the park to work out, and I would see this young gentleman outside working and just getting the site clean, making sure everything was clean. And they were building out these townhouses. I thought he was an employee for the company initially. He was technically. But what I respected about him is he reminded me one of my best friends growing up, who was Anthony Broccolini, who built the Amazon building in Talbotville. And Anthony had to work every single site, pick up every single nail. His dad made him work really hard, but he learned what work ethic meant. And I always appreciated that about Mike. I kind of did my thing. They did their thing. They obviously sold a ton of properties on their own, built some amazing buildings, brought us in to do some leasing in one of their buildings, which then my wife decided was going to be our office. And hence that's where Prime's located now. But we've worked together in many different capacities, built out this site. And beyond that, I wanted to really dig into what they're doing in Port Stanley and what Mike specifically, as a guy that is a great dad, really cares about his family, is an investor. So like a real estate investor, owns investment properties, owns a ton of stuff in Port Stanley, works really hard even in the London area, is identifying opportunities, fiscally conservative, I would say, and like strategic. And then as a builder developer, like how do you incorporate all of those things? And then maybe even talk about what the future of Port Stanley looks like, because what you guys are doing down at the wharf, I think is super cool. And I don't think everybody in the community gets the opportunity to have the conversations we have. So I figured we'd just do it, eating some good food, shout out to Nova Catering, and drinking some amazing coffee. Harbor Merchant, you are the bomb. So why don't we start off with your background? Like, how did you end up working, cleaning up sites, doing what you were doing when I first met you?
Well, I was fortunate. My dad was in the industry with Plumbo Homes before I was born, right? So he was in it. He was a real estate agent, Oliver and Associates.
Amazing.
So he got up to a great start. And then he just kind of got into it from the marketing standpoint. So he was looking at what clients were coming through, said, you know what, you guys are doing this wrong. We should start doing condos. Like condos weren't a big thing back in like the 80s.
Yeah.
And the boomers were still young, but that category didn't exist. Condos were new. And they were one of the earlier ones in London to get into it. So that was kind of his jump from agent to partnering with a builder who doesn't think too much about what the next product is. They're looking at building the next home, right? So he came in and did that side of it versus the on-site. And then they had a good relationship for 20 years. They built condos all around London.
Yeah.
Port Stanley.
You guys won an award for the ones that you guys did by GTs, right?
Yeah, the ones on Lakeview. That was right when he left Plumbo Homes,
Okay.
and he went into Domus and started that. That was the first project.
Yeah.
When they split up, they took pieces of land, and we always came to Port growing up, and then that was like, let's do it there. That became kind of our cottage there.
Yeah.
But like that was kind of the breakaway of how Domus started, and then they built condos, townhomes, kind of again throughout London. So stayed where Plumbo was and where they knew. Ventured out a bit. So St. Thomas, they did some stuff before I was there. Obviously the Port Stanley, Westmount, like North London was kind of the bread and butter. And then going through school, I mean, what's cooler than building stuff, right? So it wasn't ever my thought. I wanted to be a banker. Great idea.
Yeah. You got a picture with Warren Buffett in your office too,
yeah,
right?
that was banker. Then it became like investment, whatever. That didn't really do that. I did an internship at Versa Bank in London.
Yeah.
Great bank. They give us lots of money, so I can't really talk bad about them. But it kind of opened your eyes to that side of it, which was good because now you know where the financing standpoint comes from. But like working there day to day versus what we were doing on the construction side, I said, you know what? I think maybe I do want to get into it. It was never pushed.
Yeah.
My dad never even really mentioned it.
Sure.
There was no succession planning, which you should do in family businesses, but it just kind of happened.
Sure.
I started doing sales, so that's kind of how we met, right? I was in the townhome selling the units. Internal sales was really the main thing.
Yeah.
Agents coming in and taking over and doing all like the full stack of everything they needed to do wasn't very prevalent back 15 years ago, not that long ago, but
Yeah.
But then it just transitioned. I did sales, and it got into like new development, kind of looking for sites and helping tweak designs. And then as my dad got older, he kind of said, take it over.
Sure.
I said, okay, well, don't leave. So he's still around. But that was kind of the progression. Schooling, again, like I said, banking, finance, went to Western.
Were you snapping up investment properties on your way up too?
No, I didn't. I honestly, I didn't think
it.
about owning anything until literally like graduated.
Interesting.
I was like, what do I want to do?
What year was that approximately?
Like 20, I was at school during the recession, which was
Sure.
cool because we learned a lot. But like 2010, I think was when I finished.
Okay. Still early for London though, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we weren't really on the radar until 2016, 17, where we really saw that influx from the GTA.
Yeah, there was nothing
right?
there. 2019, 2009, I bought my first townhome, like one of our developments, right? I lived there, buddies lived with me, that kind of thing. That was my first landlord experience. And then I go, sure. But then buy another one. And then I got some buddies together from school. We did a little pool, like a little mini private equity thing. We raised some money and then bought 3. Then we said, that worked, buy another 3. That worked.
Smart.
And then that's how we kind of started doing rentals.
Yeah.
Domus proper wasn't really doing them yet. Mm-hmm. That was kind of like my intro to it. And then we did our first one, kind of worked. And then we just started rolling from there.
So yeah, you were saying you guys were building for sale, and then you were buying investment properties, doing rentals, and then the light bulb probably went off. You're like, well, we can build and keep some product as well too.
Well, I
right?
was talking before, just here with someone else about it, and like the main like light bulb moment was like the 09 recession, 2010 happened, and my dad, building is cyclical, up down, up down.
Oh, for sure.
As we know right now, we're like 2 years into like depression for building, not for sales, but new home. And looking at the market, London has a very strong rental families that have been in it for really their second generation now, but they started in the 70s.
Sure.
Drulo, Critch, Sifton.
Yeah.
Right. Like
there's only 3 or 4.
There's a handful of them, but they're like, if for Ontario, they're huge.
Huge.
Some of them are like the biggest landlords in Canada, privately held. And, looking at them as your role model going, okay, what do they do? Well, they did rentals. They don't build things and sell them.
They keep them.
They kept them.
Yeah.
And they turned their business model into building and keeping their own product. Mm-hmm. Everyone else getting started, you have to buy someone else's product or headache. And then that's how you start. Yeah. The other side of it, when you're in the development or building side, is you could build and tailor to what your needs or what you see in the market.
Yeah.
And then you create it, right? So doing that over time, recession, doesn't matter. They kind of go through it. Now, it hasn't been perfect for them forever. They did have struggles in the 90s. Yeah. There was when rates spiked, they had the same issues. But coming out of that, they built for millions, 40 million now. Like inflation is your friend when you own assets. And over time, if you want to build something sustainable without the ups and downs, rentals are a good base. So that was kind of my thought to start it. And then we just said, let's now have 2 facets. We're really good at condos. We've been doing them forever.
For sure.
There's a good rep. And then let's do the other side now in conjunction. So if today happens, we have lots of rental buildings. We're doing 2 right now. And then condo, we haven't dug a hole since 2021.
Yeah. And that makes sense. So I call it focused diversification at Prime. Like one of the reasons we do commercial, residential, we do new development is those 3 will interchange quite often, right? Like had a client build an amazing company. We leased them tiny offices. Then they bought big buildings. Then they sold the company for a lot of money. Then they bought a nice home. Now he's investing in properties. And you become more recession proof where, the same thing, like we're going through it like everybody else is. And I think from a business perspective, this is a refreshing conversation for people to hear, where even big companies like Sifton went through really hard downtimes where they had to lean out and they had to get through it, and their balance sheet didn't look like it did in the peak times. Yeah. And get rid of stuff and get cash flow injection to survive and get through to the next phase. A lot of times you end up discovering through your growth what that next phase looks like, right? And and that's the funny thing about the real estate market is, we get a 1/4 point drop last month, and the amount of, TikTok economists, not you, AJ, I'm talking about the real estate agents that go on and just saying like, it's a pivot, it's going to fly now. I was like, no, like it may bring 10% buyers back to the marketplace. So now we have maybe 30% of the actual buyers out there shopping, not 100. It may take 2, 3, 4 more. how do you survive as a community and create a more efficient business, create a more efficient product, create something better for the consumer? You do it by looking at your business model and making tweaks to it in these times, because when the market does get unlocked and 100% of buyers are back and we can't upcycle the new developments to match the demand, because that is going to come, it's just a matter of time. You won't have time to look at your model and say, what can we do in the rental space? What can we do in the new development space? It's going to be go time. And I think that the downtimes prep you for the really busy times. One question I had for you that kind of parlays from that conversation is, you've had some time to pour some of your heart and soul into what you guys are doing in at the wharf. I don't know if you would have had that time given if the market just kept ripping like it did from 2020 till now. Can you explain that project and what you guys are doing down there and what it means to you and kind of Port Stanley?
Well, that's more just a wharf. It's like everything here, right? Port is not huge. It's a decent town, really, but it can be a little bit more. It's never going to be like a city, right? It has a very good topography. Doesn't have all the erosion issues like most of the North Shore has.
Sure.
Yesterday, when we went on my boat, we did a little tour. Went to Port Bruce, Port Burwell on it. I'd never been to those.
Yeah.
Just to check them out.
And you were probably looking at the coastline all the way.
Yeah,
down
and it's
too,
just
right?
like erosion, right, everywhere, caving in, which is scary. But like Port has so many good natural features that it makes people want to come here. The beach is great, but the beach is one part of it.
Sure.
And there's a whole bunch of them. But like when you're in the town, just the way it's set up, both sides of the harbor are flanked. It's very quaint. It's like East Coast is totally the vibe.
For sure.
It has the winters to go with it.
Yeah.
But in the summer, it's awesome. The boating community here is great. They've got good marinas, well protected.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of money coming with the harbor. They're extending a break wall, so nothing southern will come into the harbor. Because right now, the mouth is open.
Sure.
So there's, I think, $30 million that has been promised different levels of government and locally to do all these other upgrades. So like that's coming on top of what's already happened. Mm-hmm. And they just did a bunch of stuff, cleaning up the berm area, building the pier. They redid the wall. So there's a lot that was already naturally coming to town, and we'd been here since 2000.
Yeah.
Coming all the time. And it's changed a lot since then. Had a very bad rap, dirty water, dirty smell, dirty, whatever you want to say, right? So,
sure.
That's been changing progressively as people come down. New businesses are here. There's different developers that are here. It's not just us. Some have been here for a while. Don West has been doing this, especially in this area, for quite some time. But when someone bigger comes in from out of town, everybody gets a little scared of it, right? But
sure.
The scale of what we're doing isn't crazy. It's crazy maybe locally, but from development in Ontario, it's not. So that's why we have different facets, right? You're talking about the harbor. We've got a piece there, Jackson's Old Fish Market. We want to do some condos there, right on the water. That's kind of in different stages. Across the way, more in the business community, so the restaurant and brewery coming. So that'll give a little more permanent life and another attraction. It's always how I thought about that part.
Sure.
As an attraction.
Year round, I'm assuming?
Year round. It's like beach is seasonal. Yeah. Train's a great attraction. The festival theater is a great attraction.
Yeah.
We already had good restaurants and eating here.
For sure. The restaurants are phenomenal as well, too.
Build like a culture around the food. Right?
Yeah.
And drinking as well. Port has
You just want a place to hang out and get off the boat, right?
Yeah, like a hangout area. But and Port, if you've driven around or if you know it, every area of Port is very very different.
Yeah.
You go to one side, you're in Muskoka, and then you come to one side, you're on the beach.
Yeah.
Right. Then you go to another side, and you're like in a subdivision that's kind of right out of any city out of London.
Yeah.
You go to another area, you're in like a little town that feels East Coast. Like every area, and you can walk to them all, does not feel like you're in the same village or community, which is kind of neat.
You go up the hill on the other side of the bridge and you feel like you're in Tennessee, like you're literally going like that.
Yeah, homes are like on the cliff,
crazy.
right? On that side.
Yeah. And it does have charm. I think that's one thing the community gets concerned about is as they see development and change, which happens in every market. Yeah. I think sometimes if they have no context to the person behind it, they don't understand, where that person's heart is for, say, the community at large. And I think when I think of what you're doing at the harbor and what it's going to become, I think it'll add to the culture, and I think it'll even create more community vibe. Where when we did a neighborhood tour of Port Stanley, and we brought down Nathan and Lindsay, and Kyle was there for that video as well too. I remember we had like a half an hour conversation with a couple people that we just met on a park bench there, and they ended up knowing Dustin, who owns the pet shop, who I used to bounce with at Jim Bob Ray's 20 years ago, right? And like that sense of community is so special. And I think so many larger markets have lost it, where I do think communities like this and certain other communities, even in big cities, are maintaining it. And there's a revival of people wanting to, instead of ending their shift at home, going home, driving in the garage and shutting their door, actually talk to their neighbors and see what they're doing and support them, right? Like Harbor Merchant, the things my staff say about them are the reason that they're here today, right? How they treat people in their community. And we're going to talk to them in a few minutes. Really does matter to me. And I guess that will segue into the next part of the conversation where, yes, you're in business. Obviously, people need to make money to survive. You have a family. You want to leave something for your kiddo. How do you factor in everything you do from a building and a work perspective? Because it can get busy investing. And how do you maintain being a good dad? And like, time goes fast. Like, how are you making time to spend with him and Lindsay? And
wife's help with that. Right?
Yeah.
Keep you in line. But I mean, our office, I have a short commute.
Yeah.
Right, which is nice, being kind of close to work. But I mean, he's like 4 or 5 now, so he's gone all day anyway. But as long as you're there in the evening, that's kind of the big thing to plan your day around. With phones, it's next to impossible to turn it off.
Yeah,
real estate's nice because a lot of the work is literally typing crap on a phone, so you can still kind of work here and there to keep up to date. But turning off when you go home is the main thing.
It's hard.
You have a nice commute, so you can get like calls and stuff done while you're driving, right? And we've talked about that. I don't have as much of that, but when I go home, I got rid of my home office. Used to have it there even before COVID.
Sure.
And I would go home and you can always work, right?
Sure.
Especially in this industry, there's always something you could be doing. Does it need to be done? Not at that moment, but it's in your mind. So till you do it, it's not gone. Yeah. So I got rid of the home office, and that was like a game changer.
That's interesting. Yeah, somebody told me that recently. They said even when you're having, like, Shannon obviously owns the business with me, so we could talk about it 24/7. Yeah. But we have some standing rules where we don't talk about it at our kitchen table, because our kitchen table is a place where we break bread. It's more for family stuff than it is business. And there's certain places we're trying to keep sacred, because I think you can turn everything into work all the time.
It's still hard.
It's super
your
stressful.
phone,
right?
you get calls, right? It's still next to impossible to do, but
yeah.
At least trying. The big one I did recently was my internet phone hack was turn all your social media apps to your like page 3. So if you get a notification, you don't get it. You have to search for it.
Yeah.
I barely go on now.
So
just by moving the app.
So I actually have no notifications on my phone except my phone and my email, or not my text messages. But I had to build some systems to make sure everything gets pinged. And I'll have like 4 assistants call me and be like, call this person now. There's a deal on the table. Let's get it done. So my response rate is still ultra fast, but I had to build that in because I realized, like, if I'm the guy checking everything all the time, I'm going to miss emails. I'm going to miss text messages. It's literally impossible. Get systems or people you trust around you that are watching the important stuff. And I also think, like, there's this misnomer of work-life balance where it's all integrated, like work life, it's in personal well-being. It's all integrated. And if you don't treat it as such, you're going to feel like you're always failing in one or the other. And people will get different levels of access based on how they show up in our community. Like, again, I'll reference Harbor Merchant. They don't really know me that well. They know my team super well, and I'm in there supporting them whenever I can be around. But given what I've seen them do, if they ask for a favor from me, I'd probably do it for them because they're within that circle.
It's a sense of community too that Port has that London does not.
Yeah.
Probably have it in Grand Bend.
Yeah.
But like living in London, I grew up in Kamoka. Kind of had it, but it was early before everybody considered it part of London.
Yeah.
Like I was out in the boonies. But like now we live in North London. See a few of my neighbors. Everyone's working. They're in and out. There's not a ton of kids in our neighborhood, but there is a few. But they're all studying. Like there's like no life to our subdivision. We would move here in a second if our office wasn't a neutral car ride downhill, right? Like I would be here in 2 seconds, but we're here every chance we can be.
Well, and you do spend a lot of time here in the
summer.
We're
here like
right?
2 or 3 days a week, right?
Yeah.
So with our cottage here, so I'd be here as much as I can because of that. Like Harbor Merchant, you know who's at the coffee shop, you know who's at the restaurant.
For sure.
You know who the girl standing at the LCBO is. Like it's very different than back home where you don't, every face is like new all the time.
Yeah, and when I was talking about the access piece, I think like your community becomes that, right? Where you will answer that phone when maybe you have these parameters that you're like, no, I'm not going to take that call because somebody needs something. You called me, you need something at some point. Well, this is a weird deal. Like, how do you feel about this? I'm a neutral third party. I'll answer it and take that call, even if I'm on vacation, because I know reciprocally you'll pay it forward to somebody else. You've talked about another concept as well, too, of even looking at like, people should think strategically. Agents watching this should listen to this, where if you have a group of friends, like put them in the same community. find a place where they could live in a similar subdivision next to each other, like locate kids closer to their parents. Because even multi-generational housing, like family units are starting to come back together, where before it was like kids couldn't wait to leave, go to university, take off from their parents, never see them again. We're moving in like old Italian grandmothers back with their kids so they can cook lasagna, take care of the kids while the kids are at work. They come home, and like we're redesigning how we think about doing real estate based on that, which I think is awesome.
Still coming, the new wave of immigrants coming in, they're a little more, they're still doing it.
Sure.
So it's not new to them, but it was to like my grandparents. They were multi-generational. Then they broke out.
Yeah.
Kind of coming back now. And it gives you a little bit of that community too. When you're all dispersed, different parts of even the city, you don't see each other as much. You don't see people that were good friends of your family as much, and it splinters everybody. And then it kind of gets, the hell am I doing this for? I don't see anybody. I'm working all the time. You know, there even when you're working, you see people you know. It's a different feeling. There's a little bit of camaraderie. You have that in our industry. You have it because you're dealing with the same people all the time, especially in a small community like this. Yeah, you're going to the businesses in the community where you're working and seeing them all the time, which is kind of cool.
Coffee shops, gyms, grocery stores, all those places too. That's where you end up. You build connections and you see who contributes to the community and who's just there to take from the harvest table, right? And I think, we try and give that opportunity to people. And that's why we host these events, is put people in a room together. We don't necessarily need something from every connection that comes from here. If you want to buy one of the units, great, fantastic. But I think at the end of the day, energy creates energy. You may not have thought of Port Stanley, and then you came down here today and you're like, it's actually way closer to London than I thought it was. And people's life, we've talked about this before, where people are now thinking of where they're going to live and where they're going to work in a very different way than they ever did before. Going back to condos and product type, before it was everybody wants a single family detached home. Now we're seeing people that are downsizing. They don't want the 4-bedroom house. I was talking about this with Lisa earlier. They don't want as much space, and they're like, well, I prefer something that has more lifestyle attached to it versus just square footage, bedrooms and bathrooms, or the name of a community. Like, what else can I get if I lived here? It's been wild to see from my Jim Bob days to today. We used to do beach volleyball against GTs and all the other bars every single Monday at GTs, saw them do what they did there. And it's wild how much they've invested in the community. On the leadership side too, how's Port Stanley been to work with in terms of like supporting what you're doing at the wharf and projects?
I mean, the new council came in and they're all new, right? So all not year and change in, but everything that we've already done was before they came in. In right. So it's hard to comment how the new ones are. We haven't really brought much forward because the market is very slow. So from an approval standpoint, we haven't had any issues. We've dealt with the mayor just getting get things going. They're not anti-development. They're like I said, nothing big has been thrown at it yet to see. They have some big decisions coming up locally. Like I was saying, they got that 30 mil for some renovations coming on. They have the harbor lands on the west. They have the berm on the east side. So they have some big strategic things that they may get to this term. I don't know. Yeah. But small towns are better to deal with. London just got so bad.
Institutional, right?
I think COVID just decimated what was already crap.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And then they've got some new managers in that they've let some people go. They've hired some new, better people, more skilled people. They
have that new floor too, which is like straight to development where you can walk in
they're trying
to expedite the process.
We got an email this morning. They have like a continuous improvement task force now for building only. Mm-hmm. So like to me, all this stuff is good because imagine if it booms again. Yeah. Like we're already worse than we were before COVID from the building approval standpoint. Sure. And then now they're starting to fix things, which will take some time. And then if like another rush happens, it's going to be hard to get things approved, right? And it'll get approved, but it'll take so long.
Takes so long.
Here you can call the guy who's reading your plan. Yeah. London, you don't know where it goes. And I think that's every big city is the same. I'm not saying London is the problem.
It's size and scale. It's institutional, right? It's, hey, like, just tell me what I need to do to make this happen because I want to build some houses for the community. People wonder why we end up in a housing crunch or a housing crisis.
No decision maker. This is what it comes back to.
For sure.
There's London is a bureaucracy. Who makes the decision? Well, everyone has to tick their box. So the decision isn't any one person's. It was a bureaucracy decision, aka red tape. Yeah. That got you approved. Small town, the guy who literally is going to sign that piece of paper. Yeah. So you can work one-on-one. And that is, I think, a big part of where you can get things done quicker in small towns.
For sure.
Is it scalable? No. Right? So it kind of only works in small towns because once you get bigger, you need more key people. So that person can't deal with them all.
Yeah, maybe a key decision maker in boroughs or specific areas to make decisions move faster. Because I mean, a big city is just a conglomeration of a whole bunch of small towns. London's a conglomeration of Old South, Woodfield, Old North, and like, again, the bureaucracy definitely slows things down. I was laughing as you were talking because we were doing something in Lucan. They busted a water main. The mayor walked over in like 5 minutes from like 5 houses down. I was like, oh yeah, I got it all figured out. And I was like, that's exactly how.
In Calgary, they have a month of no water.
Exactly,
yeah,
right?
So,
yeah, it's wild when you see. No, I think it's interesting. And the other piece I was going to say is talking building cycle wise. Like for people that are shopping, looking for houses, I don't think they realize that there is really good opportunity now to get brand new product that right now everybody's buying resale that they have to renovate. That's just what we're seeing because the prices, you already paid your land costs, your hard costs are what they are. The gap between say new and resale is such that I'll just buy that house and put 100 into it. But I feel like people are getting sick of that, where you've gotten super creative on a lot of deals we've done where if we get a buyer that's willing and able and they're in a price range, you haven't slashed all your prices, hurting all your previous purchasers. You're finding creative ways to work with that client to get them what they need, where maybe they get some upgrades they wouldn't have gotten before, maybe a basement. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can do that now because you're not in the same build cycle you were back in 2022. I guess what would you say to those types of people that are just looking at listings online and not even making the phone call to book an appointment?
Price points are meaningless kind of right now. Not that that's not like what's setting the bar, but there's other ways to get to a price if you have a budget or something, right?
Yeah.
Price is $1 million, but you can afford 9. Well, maybe they have another lot sitting there that they could build that home with a couple different finishes,
For sure.
which is what we're essentially doing.
Yeah.
Right. So if you come in and you have a number or you want to beat us up on something, that's fine.
Yeah.
But there's two sides to that. We can probably get you into where you want, but you need to be open to other ideas or not just looking at, I want that one specific home.
Yeah.
What else do you have? Or maybe the other builder might have, and he's more willing. So you need to have the conversation with your agent or wherever the sales rep is, just to say, here's where I'm thinking.
Sure.
Is there somewhere this could go? The typical way though is, front door. Here's my offer. I don't talk to anybody. I don't see anybody. and then you get the hard no, and then it's over. When you actually have the conversation, where are they from? Like I ask Kyle all the time, like where are they from? Why are they moving here? You try to dig in a little more to see why they're moving here. What are they? Maybe they got a house to sell, or they're the firm already. Okay, well that's a little different. Maybe they don't want to be here. Maybe Kokomo's is better suited for them. I don't want to force them somewhere that they're not going to be happy with, or maybe that I know will end up working for them.
Yeah.
Don't waste anybody's time. So help guide them. But if you don't talk to them, you won't be able to help figure out what the best solution is.
100%.
If you don't buy a condo, go in a rental building.
Yeah. Well, people get a wall up, right? So they'll call us, and into like open houses, people walk in and they're like, oh my gosh, like they don't want to say anything to us because they think we're going to
Please God, don't
chase
tell
them
me.
down, right? Which I get because I mean, our industry hasn't done any favors in how they treat consumers, and there's no standard of practice. So I don't blame the consumers. But like the deal we did last year, I remember a lot of it came from conversation, going back and forth and being able to converse to get the deal to the finish line or find the opportunity. I think that's the best piece of advice is talk to the person, give them your parameters, and let them come back to you with the deal. It doesn't mean that they're going to be able to, but you may not know that once we're done the 4 units that we have left here, that potentially the next phase that's coming up, we could shortlist you on the inner circle launch for that, because we will have 4 phases to open that up, where the first phase will go to people that have already given us their parameters. We know they're good people. They're already qualified, and there's an ease of doing business where they may get a little bit of a better price versus the second launch, the third launch, the fourth launch. So I think the problematic thing is paralysis by analysis, because there's so much inventory. We saw it last year where people would do showing after showing after showing, bring us an offer, negotiate terms, and then just not do the deals on the terms they said they would do. And then they leave for a month and come back and they're like, okay, we'll do the deal. And we're like, no, we sold that to somebody else. Like almost over analyzing the transaction, which I can understand because the headlines are not helping. Where
Like the spring, right? We had like 3 weeks where I'm like, this is busier. This is as busy as COVID.
yeah,
Came out of nowhere. Everyone
Yeah.
thought sentiment changed, and then went right back to dead again.
sure.
I'm like, where the hell were these people for the last 12 months? They would have got a better deal.
100%.
But they all came at the same condensed time period. So now we're thinking, now we have to scramble.
Yeah.
And maybe we got to start looking at the next phase, because if I sell 8 in the next week, I'm sold out.
For sure.
Now I've only sold 1 since then. So then it went back, right? So now we're back to let's make a deal again. But when everyone comes in a horde, it's not good for any of them. They're better when it's slow. That's when they can pick up call, talk to them,
Sure.
and work that deal out. But yeah, when they all rush together because of the headline, it's
and I think translating timelines, like, you know, where you're at in the sales cycle really helps if you're working with an agent or you're watching or listening to this, telling them kind of where your decision-making time frame is going to be is going to allow them to match you up with the opportunity. And I also think it's coming in waves. So last thing that I'll kind of say on the market cycle perspective, we just talked about it. I saw January till March was busy. March till May kind of dropped off. May was busy again till June. Everybody's gone now, apparently, on vacation. But what happens after Canada Day weekend? Or what happens when kids are back in school? Are we going to see the same cycles? I do think it's going to be like little kids playing soccer where everybody rushes the market and then disappears and rushes the market and disappears. Because political turmoil, things happening in the world, rate hikes and drops and everything too, right?
There's great deals out there right
there
now.
Is,
I watch everything all the time, especially around our properties, and see what's selling. And I'm like, I can't replicate that at today's cost to build that. That's a steal.
Yeah.
Especially new homes. Like your typical London sort of starter, not our starter home, but like 80s, 90s Harrison brick, 3,000 square foot home on a nice lot. They're all over the city, right?
Sunningdale's on sale right now too. Some of the stuff that's in there.
Well, like those older ones are 900 grand ish, 950.
Yeah, beautiful homes.
You can't build that for 1.2.
You can't buy the land, right?
The lot is 400-500.
Yeah.
Then you got to build a home with the profit on it.
For sure.
You're 1.2, 1.3 for a resale.
Yeah.
That's in the nines.
Yeah.
Like that is such a big gap in terms of feasibility of new construction.
Yeah.
We're still. That's why I'm not super positive on new in terms of it coming back in a big way. I think there's still a lot of grinding to do, and resale is just is priced very well.
Yeah.
And I'm not including the townhome condo segment, not that I'm biased, but single families seem to be where the price gap is.
Yeah.
And like you said, the lot.
We've seen that shift too on the single family side. A lot of builders have pivoted. You're either like ultra luxury, the people that aren't rate sensitive, that don't care, or you're pivoting to different areas and locations, people that are going to buy those homes. The people that bought in Sunningdale when it was in Sunningdale, they grew into what it is now and they benefit from a huge equity jump. That's where people are going to look at other opportunities. Like, you're living in Port Stanley. Like, we live in Grand Bend. I remember when we moved to Grand Bend, people thought I was moving to Thailand. And I was like, well, no, like my in-laws are 4 minutes from my house. My wife is there all the time. I'm working all the time. I'm in London pretty much every day, or who knows where I am, Port Stanley today. Doesn't really matter where I live, but we also bought in an area at the time when nobody was thinking of buying there, right? And I think looking at alternative living opportunities, taking your community with you. I mean, we're all kind of talking through the same thing over and over, that I think people just need to be a little bit more thoughtful about their lifestyle by design, how they want to be involved in the community. And I know you guys aren't a big way. I'm way over time, but I think it's been a good conversation. And if anybody wants to meet Mike after, have a chat with him, encourage him to reach out to him as well too. He doesn't do a ton on social media, but he's really good on camera.
Took you 5 years to get me here.
About that, yeah. But I've seen you on the news a couple times. You're good on camera, so it works out well.
Free publicity doesn't hurt.
I appreciate it. There is food, coffee. We'll do a breakout session with Harbor Merchant in a couple minutes, talk about what it's been like to build a business and community as well. So I'm excited for that. So thanks, Mike.